Hi and welcome to the second lecture video on Indo-European. In this video, we are going to be looking at the sound systems of Indo-European. So this is kind of where we ended last lecture video. We were looking at the Indo-European family of languages, and you can see that Proto-Indo-European, which was reconstructed from languages that are spoken today in the Indo-European language family, can be divided up into the Western branch and the Eastern branch, and English is in the Western Germanic branch of Proto-Indo-European. So what is the sound system of Indo-European languages? Well, mostly Indo-European languages are inflective. So we looked at the typology of languages towards the end of last class, and inflective languages are languages that signal differences in a tense and aspect through inflection. So I am eating versus I ate, or I have eaten with the en at the end. These are all inflections and they all signal differences in morphology. English, French, and Spanish have lost a lot of this inflectional complexity. But if you look at German, you're still, if you have studied German, if you're still studying German, you can see that German has a lot of these kind of inflections still preserved from before. So here is an example of verbal inflection. This is from Sanskrit, from the root bher. And this, I've given you the inflections on the left-hand side, and I will read you the forms on the right-hand side. This is pero, peresi, pereti, peromes, perete, and peronti. Right? So you can see the inflections are O, and sometimes it's me, si, thi, mes, mos, the, and inti. Now, when you look at the nominal category of Indo-European, you can see that nominal inflections are 8. There are 8 case inflections. These are nominative, vocative, accusative, genitive, dative, ablative, locative, and instrumental case. I will walk you through each of these. Here's an example of each of these case endings. So what is nominative case marking? In English, I'm going to illustrate this with English because that's the language most familiar to all of you. Nominative case marking is usually for the subject of the sentence. So in a sentence such as they saw me, they has nominative case. Nominative case marking, not just in English, but in other languages as well, is a null marker. So you can't actually see the marker, but it's usually the subject of the sentence. So they, in they saw me, is nominative. And then accusative, I'm going to just jump the vocative for now and go to accusative because me is an accusative case. So this is the direct object. And if you look at accusative case endings in English, these are the only prepositions or pronouns are the only form that has accusative case marking retained in English. So you're not saying they saw I, you're saying they saw me. And that difference from me to I or I to me is the case of accusative case marking. So that's a direct object. Vocative is officer, I need help. It's the person you're addressing it to. A very common example of vocative case marking is Jesus. Oh, Jesus, help me, please, right? So that's vocative case. You're addressing somebody, addressing the person. Genitive is Shakespeare's play, apostrophe S is very often genitive case marking. It's the possessor or the source. Dative is the indirect object or the recipient of the action. Give her a hand, give her the book. Her is in dative case marking. Ablative is what is separated. So he abstained from it, very often marked with a preposition. Locative is the place or the location. So we stayed home. That's a locative case marking. And then instrumental is she ate with chopsticks. So again, signaling the instrument with a preposition. So here is a list of Indo-European noun declensions. I will tell you at the outset, so your exam is going to be open book. So you don't need to memorize anything. So just don't be like, oh my God, what is all this, right? This looks really complicated, but it's actually not so complicated. So let me walk you through this table. So this is the singular form of the noun, and then this is the plural form of the noun, and these are the case endings. So nominative case, vocative, accusative, genitive, dative, ablative, locative, instrumental. And in the plural, the nominative and the vocative kind of go together. It's one form. Accusative, genitive, dative, and ablative are together again, locative and instrumental. And then this is the root form for Indo-European. And then this is how it is in Sanskrit, Greek, Latin, Old Irish, and Old English. So the singular nominative form in Indo-European, ekvos, in Sanskrit becomes ashwas, in Greek becomes hippos, in Latin becomes equus, like equestrian, right? Old Irish becomes ek, and in Old English becomes eo, and so on and so forth for each of these case marking. There are some columns that are not filled, and this means that that form does not exist. And then in the plural form, again, in Indo-European, the noun and the vocative form is ekvos, is the same as the singular nominative. There's no difference, right? And then in Sanskrit, it becomes ashwas. So it's a difference in the vowel. In nominative singular, it's ashwas. And then in plural, Sanskrit is ashwas. In Greek is hippoi. Latin is equi. Old Irish is ike. And Old English is eos, right? So you can see that there are differences between the singular forms for the noun declensions and the plural form. So one thing for you to keep in mind, especially if noun declensions or inflections are really unfamiliar to you, is that the case markings can only appear with nouns. Verbs cannot have case markings. Prepositions cannot have case markings. Adjectives cannot have case markings in modern English. So here is the word order in Indo-European. The crucial difference between word order between modern English and Old English or Indo-European is the fact that the object preceded the verb. So Proto-Indo-European word order was subject, object, verb, right? So SOV, this was the word order of PIE. And current English word order or modern English word order is SVO. So there's been a shift in the word order, right? Or Proto-Indo-European word order shifted from subject, object, verb to subject, verb, and object. And I've given you an example here from a runic inscription from 8400. So I wagastir holsten horn made. So tavido is the verb made, and the object is horn. So this is the object and this is the verb, and this is the subject, right? So SOV verbal pattern. Now, when you look at this VO and OV orders, you can see in objects such as, in word orders such as SOV that we just saw, modifiers come before nouns, conjunctions come after the words that they conjoin, and postpositions are used. And then in VO orders like modern English, you have modifiers that come after nouns, you have conjunctions that come in between the words they conjoin, and then prepositions are used. So these kind of word order occurrences are pretty systematic across the language. What are some of the changes from Indo-European to Germanic? Now, when you look at Germanic languages such as English, they only have two tenses, the present tense and the past tense. The future very often is not considered to be a tense. It is considered to be a mood, or it's considered to be aspectual rather than tense per se. So in English, you have bind and bound, and in German, you have binden and band, and in Old Norse, you have binda and band. So there are only two tenses. One is the present tense, bind, and then bound is the past tense. No Germanic language has a comparable Latin future. So Latin future perfect, pluperfect, future perfect, like laudabo, laudavi, laudaverum, and laudavero from Latin. that does not exist in Germanic languages, right? So very often we say that what exists in Germanic languages is a plus present category and a plus or minus, right? A plus or minus past. So for each verb, you can either say that this is a present tense or a past tense. So that's plus present or plus past, and then minus present and minus past. What Germanic languages instead use is to have complex verbal phrases. I shall praise. I have praised. I had praised. I shall have praised. So when you use these kind of auxiliary verbs, you can know that this is most likely a Germanic language or has similarities to a Germanic language. Germanic languages also had weak and strong verbs, and the weak verbs often ended using a dental suffix, which is the th or the, right? So this is dental, written with this, so that's t with that at the bottom. That's the dental symbol. So the, and this actually signals past time. And strong verbs in Germanic did not need this suffix. And many strong verbs have now become weak in English, and we will look at this more in detail when we go through Old English, Middle English, and Modern English. But Germanic languages also had something called the ablaut. What is the ablaut? This is why there is a vowel change in certain strong verbs in Germanic. So why do we say drive but drove? Why do we say know but knew? This is because of this process in Germanic called ablaut, where there's a vowel change in strong verbs. So now you know that the verb to drive and to know is a strong verb. So the difference, when you see that there are certain verbs, so like you can say to swim, and you can say swam, there's a vowel change again, right? So now you can guess whether this is a strong verb or a weak verb. So this is a great tool to actually teach your middle schoolers if you're interested in teaching English in the middle school or at any level, or teaching English as a second language, because people often say that English is completely idiosyncratic, English is completely bizarre. No, when you look at the history of English, when you look at the history of English language, you can see that there are a lot of changes that are completely systematic. If you know the linguistics of it, all these changes kind of, they're natural and they kind of fall in place, okay? The Germanic adjective also had the strong and weak declension, like the verbs. And the weak declension was basically a definite noun preceded by the kind of word that developed into the definite article. So the jungen Schorlas is basically the young fellow. And then the young fellows with the plural, you can see that there is a difference with the kind of declension in the adjective. So adjective declensions were very common, but modern English has completely lost it. So we don't have to really worry about that in the current English that we speak. But this was something that kind of we will look at in more detail in Old English and in Middle English. And if you're learning German or any other Germanic language, you will kind of encounter this as well. The accent system is also kind of different between Germanic and English. In Germanic, the accentuation was mostly on the first syllable. Except in certain verbs like believe and forget, where the stress was on the first syllable of the root, right? So that is, instead of the first syllable, B, it was on L, and then in forget, it was on R or in G. And the Germanic accent depended on stress rather than pitch. So English is a pitch-oriented language, so you can have a rising intonation and a falling intonation, and depending on whether you use a rising intonation and a falling intonation, you get a difference in meaning. But Germanic accent is more based on stress. So you can see that there are differences between German and English. Now, the biggest sound change of Germanic languages is what is known as the first sound change, or Grimm's law. This is going to be really, really important. This is one of the biggest sound changes that happen. And these are the Indo-European stops. This sound change affected the Indo-European stops. P, t, k. These are aspirated stops. P, t, k, voiceless stops. B, d, g, voiced stops. And these changed to these. Now, it's easy if we look at a concrete illustration and a diagram. So let's look at this illustration, right? So this is the word for foot, 3, and hard. So if you look at Latin, the word for foot is ped, Greek is pod, Sanskrit is pad, and English is foot. So you can see that p goes to a f and d goes to a t. Now, when you look at the word for 3, Latin is tres, Greek is threes, and Sanskrit is trias. And in English, it's 3, which is the th, right? So t goes to the th. And then heart, you have cord, curd, sietse, and heart, right? So a k or s goes to a h, right? So how can we capture this with respect to the Grimm's law? So I'm just gonna this a little bit of alignment. Okay. So this is the Grimm's law, and it'll be great for you to have this diagram, make a note of this, especially when you're doing your midterm, for example. The Indo-European voiceless stops moved one place down in articulation, right? And they didn't change their place of articulation much, but they just moved down the chart into the position of the voiceless fricative. So this is how Grimm's law, or the chain reaction of Grimm's law, actually happened. So we start with the aspirated, voiced aspirated stops. P, d, k. Now, b changed one position to b, which changed to p, and p changed to f. D changed to d, changed to t, to th, and g changed to g, to k, and to h. So the voiceless stops changed to voiceless fricatives, which is why in English you can see foot, 3, and heart. And then the voice stops changed to voiceless stops, and the voice aspirated stops turned to voice stops. So this was a chain reaction that happened. It'll be very good for you to keep in mind this table, as well as this diagram, because again, if you're like me, having the visual really helped, especially with the color coding, because you need to know that, well, the first chain started with the aspirated stops, because that's why we don't have aspirated stops in English currently. We don't have p, t, g. We have that in Sanskrit and other Indo-European languages, but not in English because of the Grimm's law. So the old Indo-European voiceless fricatives had to shift their manner of articulation, because otherwise too many words in the language would be identical. So that's why this was a language internal kind of shift that happened. It happened across time. It was not overnight. And it was a chain reaction. And this law is known as Grimm's law, because obviously the person who discovered it was Grimm's. It was discovered in 1822 by Jacob Grimm. You're probably familiar of Jacob Grimm from Grimm's fairy tale. Yeah, he's the one who wrote Grimm's fairy tale along with his brother. He's the same person who discovered Grimm's law. He was a philologist, a historical linguist, and he became interested in identifying these kind of sound changes and historical linguistics. So here are the specific changes. So I'll go from bottom all the way to the top. Voiced aspirates become voiced fricatives. So this is Indo-European, b, d, g. After Grimm's law became b, z, and g, right? And then in voice stops become voiceless stops. So that is b, d, g. This becomes p, t, k. And then in the last change, this p, t, k becomes f, th, and h, right, in Old English. These are the specific sound changes. Again, I'm just trying to drive home the point, because I know that this is not easy. when you first see it, but when you start looking at the smaller pieces and you have a example in mind, it's going to be a lot more clearer to you. So Indo-European p becomes Latin p, becomes Greek p, becomes Germanic p, etc. Okay. And here is a great Grimm's law application. I'm not going to be making you watch the video right now, but please by all means go to this YouTube and watch this video. It's a great way of understanding how Grimm's law happens with the use of Andrew Marvell's To His Coy Mistress, the poem. So it's a great way to kind of see Grimm's law in action, but please do watch it at home. There is a supplement to Grimm's law, and this is called as Verner's law. And this was an exception that was noted by Carl Verner. And Grimm's law affected the majority of stop consonants, right? So p, d, g, b, d, g, p, d, k. But there was another exception that went unexplained for many years. So I want you to consider the Sanskrit I turned, they turned, and the Old English. So in Sanskrit, it's vartami, vavarta, vavartima, vavartana. And if you know, I've learned Sanskrit for 10 years. So, we had to learn Sanskrit in school back in India. So which is why I can pronounce all these pretty accurately. And then the Old English, which I'm not going to try to pronounce, but H, viorte, H, viort, etc. But again, I'm going to butcher the pronunciation of Old English. So I'm not going to be doing that. But if you notice, there is this change from the th to the z, right? The thorn in all these cases. But when you come to they turned and turned, you can see that the t goes to the d, right? So the Sanskrit forms show that the consonant was a t, but Old English has the th, the thorn symbol, which was the th, like three, th. But how do we explain this? How do we explain Wurdan and Geworden, right? How do we explain the t to the d? So this was an exception to Grimm's rule, Grimm's law. And this was discovered a couple of years after Grimm found out Grimm's law, and this was discovered by another person called Carl Verner in 1875, and it came to be known as Verner's law. So it kind of happened after Grimm's law had happened. Right. So after Grimm's law occurred, consonants were voiced if they occurred before an accented syllable. So you have Wurthon and Wurthen becoming Wurdon and Wurden. And then this later became the d, right? So if the syllable had an accent, there was a change that happened from the z, the voiced z, to the d. Okay, so that's basically Carl Verner's law, which is also known as Verner's law. It's an exception that went completely amiss in Grimm's law. So here is an example of Verner's law, and if you want to learn a lot more about Verner's law, you can actually go to this YouTube video. You can view this at home. Why are Grimm's law and Verner's law really, really important? They're important because it had a large impact on the Germanic verb system. So Verner's law caused alterations between s and z in some words in West Germanic. And so there were a lot of different changes that happened because of Grimm's law and Verner's law. And that's why it's really important for us to understand these sound changes. And there were also changes in Old English. So for example, for the verb to choose, there is again that alteration between s and z in Old English. So you can see the s right here, for example, right? So these kind of changes happen because of shifts that happen due to Grimm's law and Verner's law. Now, obviously, like I said, first Grimm's law has to happen in order for Verner's law to happen, right? So it's important to keep in mind that these changes happen one after the other, because if Verner's law applies first, then Grimm's law, the change cannot happen because that word is not in that particular format for that particular change to happen. So it has been estimated that Germanic first became distinct from Indo-European around 1000 BC. And West Germanic probably branched off around the beginning of the first century AD. So that's really important to note because this was when the Germanic accent shift also kind of happened. So German, like I said, it's based on stress and accent, versus English is based on pitch. So this is the difference in the timing. Now, West Germanic can be divided into two. It can be divided into High German and Low German. And there's a second shift in sounds called the High German sound shift. And I'm not going to be talking about this in any detail. I just want you to have this map right here. The Benrath line in red is really what determines this High German and Low German sound shift. So this is German or Germany. And you can see that this is where the northern dialects were spoken and this where the southern dialects were spoken. And this shift has to do again with affrication of voiceless stops, per, ter, k, and also the voice stop de, which became devoiced. Okay, and I'm not going to be going through this in any detail. You can pause this video and read through this slide, but I just want to show you the table of the sound changes. So this happened in High German after vowels and otherwise. So you have the p, which became the f, t became s, k became k, like the African, sorry, k became ch, and then the d became the t. In other Germanic dialects or in other Germanic registers, you didn't have this change. So you have the p, which remained like p and f, and the t, which became s, and the k did not have a change, and then the d remains the same as t. So this is the High German sound shift, which kind of happened as a second sound shift, and only the northern dialects did not undergo the shift. So the northern dialects are the Low German. So this is Low German right here and High German spoken right here. So High German is what these sound changes reflect. Okay, so this is kind of where I'm going to end this lecture. We're going to come to Old English in next week, but this is where the origins. I'm gonna not talk about this in this video, but I'm gonna be talking about this at the beginning of next video. So I'll see you in that video.